The wounded sentinel, the crimson dust of Zerion 7 had turned to glass beneath the orbital strikes, and Zara Thorne was dying on it. Her silver-blue skin, marked with the geometric tattoos of a Keshari warrior, was streaked with phosphorescent blood that glowed faintly in the perpetual twilight. The plasma burns across her torso had sealed themselves, a benefit of her species' rapid clotting, but the shrapnel in her left shoulder blade ground against bone with every labored breath. 3. Rotations. She'd been crawling through this hellscape for 3 rotations since the ambush that wiped out her reconnaissance unit. The humans had been waiting, somehow knowing exactly where to strike. Now her squad was vapor, and she was alone with a failing comm unit and wounds that whispered of death. The skeletal remains of a transport vessel jutted from a crater ahead, its hull split like an egg. Zara's enhanced vision caught movement within, not the scuttling of the local scavenger beetles, but something larger, deliberate. She pressed herself against the warm glass, ignoring the way it bit into her injuries, and watched. A figure emerged, from the wreckage unmistakably human in his awkward, graceless movements. He was tall for his species, with dark hair matted with dust and clothing that had seen better cycles. In his hands he carried what appeared to be a salvaged power cell, turning it over with the careful attention of someone who understood machinery. Zara's hand moved instinctively to her plasma blade, then stopped. The weapon had been damaged. In the ambush, its energy core cracked and leaking. She had her ceremonial blade, a curved piece of star-forged metal that had belonged to her grandmother, but the human was 50 meters away and she could barely stand. Marcus Reed had been having the worst week of his life, which was saying something considering his transport had crashed. His emergency beacon was fried, and he was stranded on a planet where the air tasted like copper and regret. He'd been part of a supply run to the forward bases when the ship's navigation computer decided to have what his old instructor would have called a catastrophic personality disorder. One emergency landing later, he was the sole survivor, surrounded by enough twisted metal to build a small city, and absolutely no way to call for help. The power cell in his hands was promising. Intact housing, no obvious damage to the crystalline matrix, but without a functional transmitter it was just an expensive paperweight. He'd managed to jury-rig a basic shelter inside the transport's remains, and had been surviving on emergency rations and recycled water for the past week. He was just considering whether the mushroom-like growths near the crater's edge were edible when he saw her. At first he thought it was debris, something silver-blue catching the light from Zerion 7's twin suns. Then it moved, and Marcus realized he was looking at a Keshari warrior, one of the enemy aliens he'd only seen in briefing hollows and propaganda feeds. She was wounded, badly, dragging herself across the glass with obvious difficulty. Her armor, sleek, organic-looking plates that seemed to flow like liquid metal, was cracked and sparking. As she moved, he caught glimpses of bioluminescent blood trailing behind her. Every piece of military training screamed at him to hide, to arm himself, to remember that the Keshari had killed billions of humans in their relentless expansion across the sector. But Marcus had always been cursed with what his sister called terminal curiosity, and what his commanding officers called a disturbing lack of self-preservation instincts. The alien, female, he thought based on the briefings, had stopped moving. She lay pressed against a ridge of melted glass, her breathing visible even from his distance. As he watched, her head lifted slightly, and he caught a glimpse of large, luminous eyes scanning the area. She was looking for threats, or help, or maybe just a place to die in peace. Marcus made a decision that would have horrified his superiors and probably gotten him court-martialed if anyone had been around to witness it. He set down the power cell, picked up a medical kit from the transport's wreckage, and started walking toward the enemy. Zara's vision swam as the human approached. She tried to raise her head to at least die with dignity, but her body refused to cooperate. The blood loss was making her thoughts fuzzy, and the human's movement seemed strangely non-threatening. He stopped just outside the range of her blade, assuming she could have drawn it, and knelt in the glass dust. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, with intelligent brown eyes and the kind of face that suggested he smiled often. though he wasn't smiling now. "Well, this is new," he said in accented standard, the trade language most spacefaring species used. His pronunciation was careful, like someone who'd learned it from books rather than conversation. "I'm Marcus, by the way. Human, obviously. Terrible at following protocol and apparently incapable of leaving wounded people alone, even when they're probably going to kill me." Zara stared at him. In her delirium, she wondered if she was hallucinating. Humans didn't speak standard to Kashari. They shot first and analyzed the corpses later. "You're losing a lot of blood," Marcus continued, apparently taking her silence as permission to keep talking. "That's probably not good for you. I've got some medical supplies, basic stuff, but..." He gestured helplessly. "I have absolutely no idea about Kashari physiology. For all I know, trying to help could make things worse." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper, but he heard it. "Why what? Why am I here? Why am I talking to you instead of running? Why do I have terrible survival instincts?" He opened the medical kit, revealing packages of synthetic skin, coagulant foam, and other supplies. "Pick one. They're all probably..." "True." Zara tried to speak again, but her throat felt like she'd been breathing vacuum. Marcus seemed to understand. "Water," he said, producing a small flask. "It's recycled, tastes terrible, but it's clean." He held it out, then paused. "This is the part where I wonder if human water is toxic to your species." Despite everything, the pain, the blood loss, the impossibility of the situation, Zara almost smiled. The human was babbling like a nervous cadet, completely unlike the cold, efficient killers described in Kashari tactical reports. She managed to nod, and Marcus carefully lifted her head, tilting the flask to her lips. The water did taste terrible, but it was wonderful. "There," he said, settling back on his heels. "Now I'm going to make a completely uneducated guess that some of these supplies might help. If I do something wrong, try to make a disapproving noise before you die. I'd feel terrible if I accidentally finished you off after going to all this trouble." Zara watched as he examined her wounds with surprising gentleness. His hands were steady despite his nervous chatter, and he moved with the confidence of someone who'd patched up injuries before, even if not on alien warriors. "The shoulder's the worst," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Shrapnel, looks like. I can't remove it without proper tools, but I can seal around it. Stop the bleeding." He looked at her directly. "This is going to hurt." She nodded again, and Marcus went to work. The coagulant foam burned like liquid fire, but it worked. Zara felt the bleeding slow, then stop. The synthetic skin sealed over the smaller cuts, and though she was still badly injured, she no longer felt like she was fading away moment by moment. "Better?" Marcus asked. "Better," she managed, her voice stronger now. "Good. Because we need to get you out of the open. My shelter's not much, but it's hidden and relatively comfortable. Can you walk?" Zara tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The world spun and she felt Marcus's hand steadying her. "Right. Walking's out. How do you feel about being carried by someone half your size?" She looked at him. Really looked. He was smaller than most humans she'd encountered in combat, built more for thinking than fighting. But his eyes were determined, and despite his self-deprecating jokes, he'd just saved her life. "You would do this?" she asked. "Help me? Your enemy?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. "Maybe you're my enemy tomorrow. Right now, you're just someone who needs help, and I've got help to give." He stood, brushing glass dust from his knees. "Besides, you haven't tried to kill me yet, which puts you ahead of most of the wildlife on this planet. Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." As Marcus helped her to her feet, supporting her weight with surprising strength, Zara felt something shift inside her chest. It wasn't just the wounds healing, it was something deeper, more fundamental. For the first time in her military career, she was beginning to wonder if everything she'd been taught about humans might be wrong. The transport's interior was cramped but surprisingly well organized. Marcus had cleared space among the wreckage, creating a small living area complete with salvaged bedding, a makeshift table, and what appeared to be a still for purifying water. Emergency lighting cast everything in a soft blue glow. Home sweet home, Marcus said, helping Zara settle onto a padded surface that might once have been a pilot's seat. It's not much, but the hull's intact enough to block most of the radiation, and I've got enough supplies for maybe another week. Zara looked around the space with professional interest. For a human, for anyone, stranded alone on a hostile world, he'd done remarkable work. The shelter was defensible, well supplied, and showed signs of long-term planning. You've been here long, she observed. 8 days. You're my first visitor. He handed her another flask of water and what looked like a nutrition bar. Fair warning, the food tastes like cardboard mixed with regret, but it's got everything a growing human needs. No idea if it's suitable for Kashari, but you're welcome to try. Zara accepted the offering and took a careful bite. It did taste terrible, but her body's reaction was positive. No nausea or rejection responses. It's adequate. High praise. I'll put that on the packaging. Marcus settled across from her, his own meal in hand. So, if you don't mind me asking, and feel free to tell me it's classified, what happened out there? You looked like you'd been through a grinder. The question brought back memories Zara would have preferred to keep buried. The ambush, her squad's screams the moment she realized they'd been betrayed by their own intelligence. But something about Marcus's manner, curious rather than interrogating, made her want to answer. Reconnaissance mission, she said simply. We were expected. Marcus's expression darkened. Someone sold you out? So it would seem. Zara met his eyes. Your people are more clever than we credited. My people didn't do that. The certainty in his voice surprised her. You cannot know. I can, Marcus interrupted, because I know what happened to my transport. We were carrying medical supplies, civilian refugees. The attack came from nowhere. Kishari fighters, fast and precise. They knew exactly where to hit us. He paused. Someone sold us out too. They sat in silence for a moment, the implications hanging between them like smoke. There's a third player, Zara said finally. Has to be. Someone who benefits from keeping this war going. Marcus leaned back against the bulkhead. Question is, what do we do about it? We? Zara's tone carried a note of surprise. You're stuck here, I'm stuck here. We're both being hunted by people who aren't who they claim to be. Seems like we is about all either of us has right now. Zara studied his face in the blue light. There was no deception there, no hidden agenda she could detect. Just a human who'd risked his life to save hers and was now offering partnership in the face of impossible odds. It went against everything she'd been taught, everything she'd believed about the war and the enemy and her duty as a warrior of the Kashari Dominion. But as exhaustion finally began to claim her, Zara found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, everything she'd been taught was wrong. We, she agreed softly, and closed her eyes. Outside, Zarion 7's twin suns set behind. The glass wasteland, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. And in the wreckage of a human transport, 2 enemies slept safely side by side, protected by nothing but trust and the growing certainty that the real war was being fought by different players entirely. When Stars Fall, Silent Part 2, Beyond Thee. Asha Zara woke to the sound of Marcus swearing creatively in 3 different languages, only one of which she recognized. The bioluminescent patterns along her arms, a Kashari trait that indicated emotional state, flickered with mild amusement, despite the dull ache in her shoulder. Problem? She asked, sitting up carefully on the makeshift bedding. Marcus looked up from a tangle of wires and circuit boards, his hair sticking up at odd angles. Define problem. If you mean is our communication array held together by hope and spite, then no problem at all. And if I define it differently, then we're completely screwed. He gestured at the mess of salvaged electronics. I've been trying to build a long-range transmitter from spare parts. The good news is I think I can reach the neutral zone colonies. The bad news is that doing so will light us up like a beacon for anyone else listening. Zara studied the device with professional interest. Her people were warriors first, but every Keshari received basic technical training. The humans' work was crude but ingenious. Components that had never been designed to work together, somehow functioning in harmony. "How long before it's ready?" she asked. "Few hours, maybe less." Marcus's hands were steady as he connected another circuit, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. "Thing is, once we send that signal, we'll have maybe 30 minutes before someone comes looking. Could be rescue, could be..." He didn't finish the sentence. "Could be death," Zara completed. "For both of us." Marcus nodded, then looked at her directly. "You don't have to do this. You could wait. Try to signal your own people instead." "I won't stop you." The offer hung between them like a challenge. Zara considered it seriously. Her duty to the Dominion, her oath as a warrior, the fact that she was contemplating treason simply by being here. But then she remembered the ambush, the too perfect timing of the attack, and Marcus's gentle hands treating her wounds. "My people would ask questions I cannot answer," she said finally. "About how I survived, about who helped me, about why I didn't kill you when I had the chance. And the truth would get me killed. The truth would get us both killed." Zara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep blue, determination mixed with resolve. "We send your signal." Marcus's smile was small but genuine. "Partners in crime, then. Partners in survival." They worked together for the next several hours, Marcus explaining the technical aspects while Zara helped with the delicate assembly work. Her hands were steadier than his, a benefit of Keshari neural enhancement, and she found herself fascinated by the creative problem-solving required. "You're good at this," Marcus observed as she successfully joined two incompatible power couplings. "Ever consider a career change from professional warrior to electronics technician?" "The Dominion does not approve of career changes," Zara replied, but there was no bitterness in her voice. "We are what we are bred to be." "Bred?" Marcus paused. "In his work? Like literally bred? Genetic manipulation?" Zara's patterns flickered with what he was learning to recognize as embarrassment. "Not entirely, but our society is structured around genetic aptitudes. Warriors breed with warriors, engineers with engineers. It ensures optimal offspring. For specific roles, that's..." Marcus struggled for a diplomatic response. "Efficient, I guess. It is practical. It ensures social stability and maximizes individual potential within predetermined parameters." The word sounded rehearsed, like something she'd been taught rather than concluded. "What would you have chosen if you could have been anything?" The question clearly surprised her. Zara's hands stilled on the components, her pattern cycling through several colors before settling on a soft green he hadn't seen before. No one has ever asked me that." She was quiet for a long moment. "When I was very young, before my warrior training began, I liked to study the star charts, the way trade routes connected distant worlds, how different species adapted to different environments, I suppose. An explorer, perhaps. Or a xenobiologist." Marcus grinned. "Dr. Zara Thorne, Galactic Explorer, has a nice ring to it." "Thorne is not my full name," she said softly. "Among my people, warriors earn additional names through deeds in battle. I am Zara Thorne Kalashti Mordon. It means, roughly, Zara of the noble lineage, bringer of swift death, she who stands firm against the storm." "That's incredibly badass," Marcus said seriously. "Though I think I prefer just Zara. The other makes me nervous about sharing small spaces with you." For the first time since he'd known her, Zara laughed, a musical sound that made her patterns flare bright silver. The moment was interrupted by a sharp beeping from the communication array. "Is that supposed to happen?" Zara asked, her warrior instincts immediately alert. Marcus checked the readings and his expression darkened. "Someone's scanning. Active sensors, military grade." He began rapidly powering down non-essential systems. "They're not close yet, but they're looking for something." "Us? Has to be. This area was empty when I crashed." Marcus's hands flew over the controls, activating what appeared to be a stealth protocol. "Good news is my modifications to the transport's hull should keep us hidden from casual scans. Bad news is, if they do a detailed sweep..." How long do we have? 20 minutes, maybe 30 if we're lucky. Zara was already moving, gathering their essential supplies with practiced efficiency. The communication array, can you make it portable? Some of it. The transmitter core, basic controls. But we'll lose most of our range and all of our encryption. Better than losing our lives. Zara helped him disconnect the critical components, her movements quick and precise. Where do we go? Marcus pointed through the transport's cracked viewport toward a series of rocky outcroppings about 2 kilometers away. Cave system. I scouted it when I first crashed. Too unstable for permanent shelter, but it'll hide us from sensors. They packed quickly, taking only what they could carry. As they prepared to leave, Marcus paused at the transport's entrance, looking back at the small space that had been home. Leaving's always hard, Zara said quietly. Even when staying means death. Speaking from experience, I've left many places, many people. Her patterns dimmed to a subdued amber. It never gets easier. Marcus nodded, understanding more than she'd said. Come on. Let's go find somewhere new to not die. The journey to the caves was treacherous. Zerion 7's surface was a maze of glass ridges and unstable debris, and Zara's injuries slowed their progress, despite her insistence she was fine. Marcus had fashioned a crude crutch from transport wreckage, but she rarely used it, too proud or too stubborn to show weakness. Halfway there, they heard the distinctive whine of atmospheric craft approaching. Down, Marcus whispered, pulling Zara behind a twisted piece of hull plating. Through the gaps in their cover, they watched 3 sleek fighters streak overhead, not Kashari or human designs, but something else entirely. Something wrong. Those aren't standard military craft, Zara observed, her voice barely audible. No, and they're scanning in a pattern I don't recognize. Marcus pulled out a small pair of magnification lenses salvaged from the transport. The hull configurations. I've never seen anything like them. The fighters circled the area methodically, their sensors painting the landscape with invisible energy. One passed directly overhead, close enough that they could see details of its construction, organic curves mixed with crystalline technology, propulsion systems that seemed to bend light around them. Third player, Zara breathed. You were right. I hate being right about things like this. Marcus waited until the fighters moved on before signaling they could continue. Come on, those caves are looking better by the minute. The cave system was more extensive than Marcus had initially realized. What appeared to be simple rock formations from the outside opened into a network of tunnels that stretched deep into Zerion 7's crust. Bioluminescent fungi provided dim lighting, and the air, while stale, was breathable. They set up their temporary camp in a chamber about 50 meters from the entrance, close enough to monitor the surface, far enough to avoid detection. Marcus began assembling the portable communication array while Zara explored their surroundings with a warrior's eye for defensive positions. Interesting, she called from a side tunnel. Marcus, you should see this. He found her examining what appeared to be tool marks on the cave walls, precise cuts that were definitely artificial but unlike anything either of their species would make. These aren't natural formations, Zara said, running her fingers along the smooth surfaces. Something intelligent made these tunnels. Something that's not human or Kashari. Marcus's expression was grim. How old do you think they are? Hard to say. Could be decades, could be centuries. Zara's patterns flickered with unease. But if there's another spacefaring species in this sector, why haven't we encountered them before? Maybe we have. Maybe we just didn't realize it. They returned to the main chamber, both lost in uncomfortable thoughts. As Marcus worked on the transmitter, Zara kept watch, her enhanced hearing picking up sounds from the surface, the distant hum of search craft, the occasional rumble of heavy machinery. They're setting up for a long search, she reported. Multiple sites, coordinated pattern. Very professional. Professional enough to find us here? Eventually. Zara's honesty was brutal but appreciated. These caves will hide us for a while, but if they bring in ground teams with proper equipment, Marcus nodded, connecting the final components of their makeshift transmitter. Then we better hope someone friendly is listening. The device hummed to life, its improvised display showing a basic interface. Marcus tuned through several frequencies, looking for any sign of neutral zone activity. There, Zara pointed at a signal spike. That pattern. It's a merchant frequency. Civilian traffic. Marcus adjusted the settings, and gradually a voice emerged from the static, speaking in the common trader dialect, advertising cargo space and reasonable rates. It was the most beautiful sound either of them had ever heard. This is, Marcus paused, realizing he'd never actually planned what to say. This is Marcus Reed, human civilian, requesting emergency assistance. I'm stranded on Zerion 7, with a companion. We need immediate evacuation. The response came after several tense seconds. Marcus Reed, this is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the independent freighter Dancing Phoenix. Did you say Zerion 7? That's a restricted war zone, friend. I'm aware of that, Captain. It's why I need evacuation. Another pause. Longer this time. What's your situation? And who's your companion? Marcus looked at Zara, who nodded slowly. My companion is Zara Thorne, Kashari civilian. We're both refugees from the conflict, and we have information about third-party involvement in the current hostilities. The silence stretched so long that Marcus wondered if they'd lost the connection. When Captain Tanaka's voice returned, it was carefully neutral. That's quite a claim, Mr. Reed, and quite a companion. My ship can handle extraction, but I'll need some kind of verification that this isn't a trap. What kind of verification? Tell me something only a real refugee would know. Something about the war that isn't in the official reports. Marcus and Zara exchanged glances. Then Marcus keyed the transmitter again. The attacks on both our convoys came from ships using unknown technology. Organic hull designs, crystalline, power systems, propulsion that bends light. Someone's playing both sides, Captain. And they're doing it with tech that doesn't belong to any known species. This time the silence was even longer. When Tanaka spoke again, her voice was tight with controlled emotion. Mr. Reed, how quickly can you get to extraction coordinates? Depends where they are. I'm sending you nav data now. It's about 8 kilometers from your current position, but it's the closest I can safely land. You'll have maybe a 20-minute window once I enter atmosphere. The coordinates appeared on their improvised display, a flat area beyond the cave system, exposed but accessible. We'll be there, Marcus promised. See that you are. And Mr. Reed, bring whatever evidence you have about those unknown ships. There are people in the neutral zones who need to hear this. The transmission ended, leaving them in relative silence, broken only by the distant sounds of searching craft. 8 kilometers, Zara said thoughtfully. With my injuries, rough terrain, and active patrols, it won't be easy. But it's possible. Zara's pattern shifted to determined blue. It's possible. Marcus began packing their essential gear, including a portable data recorder he'd used to document the unknown ship designs. Ready for one more adventure, Dr. Thorne? Dr. Thorne? She asked, confused. Your other career, the one you chose. Marcus smiled at her. Xenobiologist and galactic explorer Zara Thorne. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? For a moment, Zara's patterns flared with something Marcus had never seen before. Hope, bright and silver as starlight. Yes, she said softly. It does. They left the caves as Zerion 7's twin suns reached their zenith, painting the glass wasteland in harsh, brilliant light. Behind them, the search craft continued their methodical hunt. Ahead lay 8 kilometers of dangerous terrain and the promise of freedom. As they walked, Zara leaning on Marcus's improvised crutch, Marcus carrying their gear and the precious evidence of conspiracy, neither spoke of what would happen next. The neutral zones, testimony before colonial authorities, the slow process of building trust between species that had been at war. But for now, it was enough to walk together toward the horizon, two enemies who had chosen to become something else, entirely. Partners, friends. and perhaps in time proof that even the longest wars could end not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The extraction point lay ahead, and with it, the future they were choosing to build together.